Yes. So in the last segment, we have looked at the adaptations of the components of the blood, that is the platelets, fibrinogen, and plasma, and also white blood cells. Now, welcome back to the blood groups. We are going to look at the blood groups. So, you belong to a certain blood group, and there's a reason why you belong to a given blood group. So, if you belong to a given blood group, why do you belong to that blood group? So we are going to study what we call the blood groups, because we are dealing with the blood, so that you understand how important the blood group is. So, how is the blood group determined? Now, blood groups are normally determined by what we call antigens present on the individual's red blood cells. So, the red blood cells have what is called some protein materials that we call antigen. These antigen are the ones that determine the blood group. Now, if antigens determine the blood group, what are the types of antigen that we have? So, the red blood cells normally contain certain proteins that we call antigens on their plasma membrane. So, on the surface, if this is the red blood cell, then on the surface of red blood cells, we normally have proteins that we call antigens. We have proteins that we call antigen on the surface. We have two types of antigens, and these antigens, they are normally named using letters, capital letters. So we have antigen A and antigen B, capital letters, the way you can see them on the screen. Antigen A and antigen B. These are proteins that are found on the plasma membrane of the red blood cells. Now, these proteins, they are of two types, and therefore an individual, if you have antigen A on the cell membrane of your red blood cell, then you have blood group A. An individual with antigen B has blood group B. So if you are B, then it means you have antigen B on the plasma membrane of the red blood cells. Now, what about somebody who has two of them, that is AB? So an individual with both antigen A and B on the cell membrane of the red blood cells, that individual is categorized as belonging to blood group AB. So we have four blood groups, that is A, B, AB. And finally, we have another category of individuals who lacks, they actually lack the antigen A or B, meaning their red blood cells, the plasma membrane of their red blood cells do not have or do not possess any of the two antigen, that is antigen A and B. Such individuals, they belong to blood group O. So you know why if you are O, you are categorized as O. When you are categorized as B, AB, you know the reason why. But is that all about the blood groups? No, there are some other things. Because when talking of blood groups, we must consider three things. We must consider the antigen, a protein called antigen, whether A or B is present, whether both or whether none. Then there is another protein that is called antibodies, also contributing towards the blood group. The antibodies, we have antibody A, which is small a, and antibody B, which is small b. And finally, we look at the third factor which contributes to blood groups. You call it the rhesus factor. So you can either have a rhesus factor, meaning you are rhesus positive, or you may lack the rhesus factor, meaning you are rhesus negative. So you can be O positive, O negative, things like that. But let us move on and see what is there. Now, the plasma too has proteins called antibodies. The plasma. Remember, antigens are located on the plasma membrane. Plasma membrane means the cell membrane of the red blood cell. But now we are talking of the plasma of the blood having other proteins that we call antibodies. Now, these antibodies are of two types. We have antibody A and antibody B. We have antibody A and antibody B. Now, since we have antibody A and antibody B, how do they contribute to their blood groups? I'm going to use a table here, and in that table, I will have a column with blood group. Another column with antigen on red blood cells, and then antibody in plasma. So that we may understand what we are talking about. We have said we have blood group A, B, AB, and O. So how do we arrive at these blood groups? Now, one. So we have said we have antigen. We have two types of antigen, antigen A and antigen B. So therefore, a person with blood group A has antigen A on the red blood cell. A person of blood group B has antigen B. And when both the antigens are present, then both antigen A and B are present, then you will have blood group AB. If you lack the two antigens, meaning you have none, then you are categorized as blood group O. That one we have understood very well. And then now we are bringing in the antibodies, that the plasma has proteins called antibodies. And these antibodies are named using letters. We have two types. We have antibody A and antibody B. Now, one thing about the antigen and antibody relationship is that the antigen and antibody should not correspond. Correspond meaning a blood cannot have antigen A and antibody A. A and A, those are same letters. So this one can never happen. If an individual is of blood group A, that individual will have automatically, it is as a result of antigen A, that individual will have antibody B. So that this antibody does not correspond to the antigen, which may bring what is called agglutination. Now, and one with antigen B will have antibody A in the plasma of the blood. An individual with both antigen A and B on the red blood cells cannot have antibody A, because A will correspond to antigen A. cannot have antibody B because B will correspond to antigen B. Such an individual will have no antibody at all. Such an individual will have no antibodies. Then, we have the fourth case for those individuals with no antigen on their red blood cells. Now, these individuals will have both antibody A and B in their plasma. So, such is the case of blood groups dealing with antigen and antibodies present. Now, so let's move on. Now, we should know that the antigen and the antibody should not correspond. That one we have agreed, and we are going to see why. Corresponding means, I explained, that you cannot have antigen A and antibody A. You cannot have capital A, we cannot have capital A existing together with small a. This one will cause what is called blood agglutination. So if antigen and antibody corresponds, then what is called agglutination of red blood cells will occur. And what is this agglutination? Agglutination means the clumping together. Agglutination means the clumping together of red blood cells due to antigen-antibody reaction. Clumping together, the blood coming together is like clotting. Blood solidified, forming clots. So, if that one takes place, then we say agglutination has occurred. Agglutination is not clotting. Agglutination involves the reaction between antigen and antibody when they correspond. Agglutination takes place within the undamaged blood vessels, while clotting majorly occurs on damaged blood vessels. So we have talked about that, the blood groups, antigen and antibodies present. Now, that one brings us to the end of this session. Let us meet next time in the Google Classroom. Thank you for listening.